Hi everybody, and welcome back to our discussions with the team from the last grade first and their Antarctica crossing that they are planning from coast to coast. My name is John, and I'm here with Gareth and Richard.
Hi John.
Hi folks.
Hey guys. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We've had quite a few good discussions around the Antarctic continent, equipment, COVID, and the fact that you're both medical professionals that have been on the front line of the COVID pandemic. And I think that cues us quite well into our next discussion point, which is medical equipment and basically what happens in Antarctica in a medical emergency. Obviously, we can't take ventilators and ICU units down with us. There are no field hospitals that get built along the way. And any field base itself in respect to where you guys would be on the expedition is quite a distance. So what happens down south when there's a medical emergency, and what do you carry with you guys in your pulks?
I think the first thing you need to do when thinking about the medical approach to these expeditions is the planning and preparation that goes into all this before you go. It's a robust risk assessment of everything that could possibly, all the adverse outcomes from across the whole expedition, and then organising a detailed search and rescue plan to make sure that we're able to be evacuated at each part of the expedition. And then talking to the medical team that will be essentially on the end of the phone and at the nearest clinics while we're on the ice. So Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions will have a small field hospital at Union Glacier, but that will be 2,000 kilometers away from us at our most remote point. So the key is, once you have all those things put in place before the expedition starts, then when you get onto the ice, to make sure that you have enough with you to make sure that you're able to keep going forward. And I think the fact that Rich and I are both doctors is a massive advantage, because we're not going to be able to be performing major medical miracles out on the ice, but what we will be able to do is we'll be able to assess and predict and try and prevent all those things that may stop the expedition from continuing from a medical perspective. And they're often simple things: chest infections, skin infections, musculoskeletal injuries, all those things. And that would be the primary focus of our medical care on the ice.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. It's Gareth's an anaesthetist, and I'm an emergency physician, and whilst give us an emergency room or an operating theatre, and we could attach people to all sorts of bits of clever machinery that can keep them alive. But out there on the ice, it really strips back to the essence of what being a doctor's about, which is around basic clinical assessment, decision making, trying to be objective. If one of us has a problem, then the other one's there to sort of think about it from an outside point of view, to sort of change their mindset and going from being a friend and a fellow explorer to being a doctor for a few minutes to examine us and try and produce a kind of independent medical opinion. And as Gareth say, it's the small things that, or the things that start off small, that can go on to really affect the expedition. If we fall down a crevasse, or there's an accident with a sled and we break a leg, in some ways that's simple. It's pain relief and it's calling for evacuation, and then it's a case of surviving, which could be several days before the plane comes. Other than that, there's nothing actually sort of medically very clever to do. A lot of so if you strip that back to what sort of medical equipment that we're wanting to take with us, again, a lot of it really is around focusing on those basic simple things. So, blisters and foot care and basic skin care, trying to avoid complaints like polar thigh, which is the acceleration of the cold headwinds between your legs. Just the sort of Venturi effect of the air being funneled between your legs means that your inner thighs experience a colder temperature than the rest of you, and can lead to a horrible, debilitating, itchy rash. Trying to make sure that we don't get things like that in the first place, or we recognize and treat really early signs of it so they don't get to the stage where they become debilitating. It's much more important than having fancy, clever medical equipment. So being doctors is really going to be a case of using our decision-making skills as much as any sort of hard medical skills.
And things like so it's almost prevention is better than cure. That's what you're going for when you going in with your mindset that you need to be able to assess yourselves every day, make sure that you are preventing certain things from happening rather than trying to find the cure for them after they have happened, or treating it after it's happened. But things like frostbite, snow blindness, those things, how would you treat those, or how would that affect the progress of the expedition?
Yeah, and I think very much the same sort of principle applies. And this is this principle that's very much built into the essence of this expedition, is that what we're doing is right at the edge of what's humanly possible.
Yeah.
We're not going to be successful if we don't optimize everything. And that goes for everything that we're talking about in all of these other episodes, but it also goes for our health while we're on the expedition. We have to be able to live. We have to find a way to be able to live in Antarctica, pulling our sleds forward day after day for what is almost an indeterminate period of time. Yes, it'll take us 100, 110 days, but almost to get to that point where that becomes sustainable. Theoretically, you could just keep going after that. And if we're accumulating damage and injuries above and beyond what's the bare minimum necessary, then we're not going to be successful. So it's all about prevention rather than about treatment. So the same goes for cold injuries and things like snow blindness. So some of it comes down to really simple stuff, just being incredibly careful. We'll have a glove layering system that will mean that when we're moving along, not doing very much with our hands, we can have nice big mittens on our gloves, making sure that our fingers stay warm the whole time. But when we're doing things outside, like putting a tent up, for example, we need to have layers underneath that we can have just the right amount of dexterity to be able to carry out the tasks we need to do, but without ever letting unprotected skin in contact with the air, and certainly not in contact with other objects like tent poles or bits of metal, because those are the tiny little microscopic instances that can give you. It only takes a few seconds of taking your gloves off, getting your bare skin in contact with a tent pole to get cold injury in extremely cold temperatures. And so a few seconds of a lapse in concentration can give you an injury that then becomes increasingly debilitating as the expedition goes on. One of the most serious things you can do to a cold injury is you can have repeated cold injury, or once you've got a relatively minor cold injury, is to have then a second cold injury on top of that. There's sort of an exponential severity in cold injury. And so you strip it right back to the beginning, and the most important thing is just being incredibly careful and making sure that you don't make that little slip up that can start off a cold injury on something like your fingers, which is so incredibly vital. Similar thing goes for snow blindness. So, whilst it's incredibly cold out there, the amount of UV radiation is enormous. There'll be 24-hour daylight, huge amounts of sun, all reflecting up off the snow. So eye protection is going to be absolutely key. We need to be making progress every possible day that we can make it on the ice if we're going to meet our distance targets. So if we take our goggles off or our glasses off for a few minutes, and we get some snow blindness, so there's the damaging effects of ultraviolet radiation on your eyes, you can eventually be tent bound for 2, 3, 4 days whilst your eyes recover. and that's a time delay that we can't afford. So again, it's just about being incredibly careful and stopping these things happening rather than treating them once they have happened.
And so something you mentioned there was that it's a 110-day expedition, and you need to obviously mentally prepare, or you need to prepare yourself physically for that duration, and you need to be able to know that you need to repeat day after day after day. So it becomes a task almost, that you know these are the tasks you need to complete. But mentally, it's not a case of, well, 110 days, let's count them down and we'll get to the end goal. Mentally, it needs to become a, yes, it's 110 days, but this becomes my lifestyle indefinitely. You almost need to transcend into living in a polar environment. And Gareth, is there anything that you can maybe say about the mental health aspect? As like, you need to physically take care of yourself and physically be able to treat any injuries, but there's a massive mental game in play here as well to get to the end line. And yeah, it's not about being the champions and getting to the finish line. It's about being able to sustain yourself mentally and also protect yourself mentally from any mental injuries that you may sustain.
Yeah, and it's a huge element to the expedition, and one we've been working quite hard on and talking a lot about. So Rich and I have been, talking a lot about that exact aspect of switching our thinking from the fact that we've got to get from one side of the continent to the other, but instead just to take every day as it comes and essentially just live in Antarctica for 4 months and just make sure that we just completely adapt to our surroundings, and with the goal of just moving forward 26 kilometers a day every day, and that's our goal for the day. But otherwise we're just there and we're existing in Antarctica, and I think that will have a profound impact on the way that we approach things from a mental perspective. Plus, there are a number of positive adaptive coping strategies that you can put into place for these sorts of expeditions. A positive approach to pain and endurance. There's been a lot written in the scientific sports science literature about how endurance athletes respond and perform in their response to pain. So if they essentially have a positive response to that endurance pain or the musculoskeletal pain, then they will perform much better than those that have negative coping strategies. It seems like something that's completely obvious, but it's often something that people completely overlook as well. And then we're going to be applying this across the board. So positive approaches to adverse conditions. So we're able to control the things that we can control. We're able to control the way that we approach bad things happening. So we get stuck in the tent for 4 days because of a big storm. There's nothing we can do about that. We hit a heavy crevasse field that delays our ability to move forward. Then there's nothing we can do about that. We've just got to cope with it and move forward. But we can control how we respond to these bad things mentally, and that's what we're going to be working very hard on. And so we're working with Dr. Kate Bacher, who's a clinical psychologist, has been in the military for many years, working with special forces. She's spent many years working with teams in isolated environments. So there's no one better than her to be working with for our mental approach to this expedition.
Amazing.
And I think this, sorry, John, and I think I think Gareth's absolutely right. I think probably our mental health and our mental approach to this is one of the key determinants about our success. But there's this real interrelationship between physical health, physical well-being, and mental well-being. They're not distinct. They're all part of the same general holistic approach to how we survive in these conditions. We maintain your physical health, so you feel well, you feel strong, you minimize your injuries, minimize the amount of pain that you're in, all feeds into how well you're able to cope mentally. So it's really about the sort of whole health package, about how we live on the expedition that's key to success.
So yeah, so Richard, you were mentioning earlier that, or we mentioned earlier that between Gareth and yourself in a hospital, you could put a lot of really cool pieces of equipment on a patient, keep them alive, ventilated, and basically save their lives within a hospital setting. But going to Antarctica, you have a limited space in your bulks. What would be like the essential pieces of medical equipment that you would take with you, or what is carried with you on this expedition?
Yeah, so it's an absolutely key question, and I think, like with all of the bits of equipment, it's really a balance between weight, space, and what we might need. So actually, our focus is going to be on the simple stuff. The most likely problems that we're going to encounter are problems with our skin, musculoskeletal problems, and potentially things like chest infections. So we're going to be having plenty of plasters, bandages, bits of padding, lots of strapping. We'll be taking things to look after our eyes. We'll have a variety of different sort of eye drops available, and we'll have antibiotics that we can treat chest and skin infections with. Yeah, I mean, there's not going to be, we're not taking a ventilator with us. We're not going to take really clever equipment with us. Probably the other medication we'll take with us is some good pain relief. But outside of that, I think people will be, despite us being doctors, most of what we will be taking with us is what any explorer, without specific medical training, would be taking on a trip like this. The key thing that we add, being doctors, really is around decision making and early treatment and prevention. And
I think included in your medical bag will be an iPod, maybe with some good audiobooks for those days in the snow, in the storm, in the tent, or just to have a bit of a mental break from everything. Yeah, as much as the antibiotics are important, I think a good audiobook or a good album or a playlist is just as important.
Yeah, so, absolutely right.
So yeah, guys, thanks so much. I think that brings our discussion on the medical side to a close. I really appreciate your time, and look forward to chatting to you guys next time.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John, and thank you all for listening. And if you want to hear some more, then please share over the social media platforms and subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll see you next time.